Continue to follow news out of Fergus Falls, where two men have been found guilty on all charges in a human smuggling case in which a family of 4 died while trying to cross the border. Valley News Team's Bobby Fallon has been in the courtroom for the verdict while it was being read. He has more from live in studio. Bobby.
Defendants Harsh Kumar Patel and Steve Shan found guilty on the charges relating to human smuggling, including conspiracy to bring migrants into the country illegally. Now, it took the jury just about over an hour to return the guilty verdict. The case revolved around the event that took place on the morning of January 19, 2022, where the Patel family, no connection to the defendant, froze to death while trying to cross the border into Minnesota. It's a scheme that Patel and Shan organized and made money off of.
The words immoral depravity are the best that I have to describe the conduct that led to this terrible, terrible result. Nothing we can do will change that. We can and have brought justice to those responsible. And for
Now, one of the lawyers for Patel said that after the verdict, they plan to appeal, but also that Patel will weigh all of his options now. And a juror from Clearwater, Minnesota, said that afterwards that he couldn't imagine what the Patel family and others had to go through in the middle of nowhere. Now, sentencing is scheduled for next March. Stacey, some of these charges carry a maximum of 20 years in prison, but attorneys went on to say that federal sentencing guidelines rely on complicated formulas, and various factors will be considered in determining what sentences prosecutors will recommend. Stacey.